Hello and welcome to top10list.org, where you get a world of knowledge in 10 simple points. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the top 10 albums of the 1970s era. So let's go ahead and dive right in at number 10 on our list with Pink Floyd The Wall, 1979. It is the 11th album from the band, and it was recorded from January to November 1979 and released on November 30th of 1979. Its tracks had themes of abandonment and isolation as the band's several past albums. It was the most successful album of the 1980s and peaked number 87 at Billboard's 500. Number 9 is Led Zeppelin's Physical Graffiti, released in 1975, and this is the sixth studio album by the legendary rock band. The album included only 8 tracks due to the band's circumstances when John Paul John, the keyboardist, decided to leave the band. However, the tracks were longer than the usual LP tracks. The album was re-released and included several unreleased tracks as a double side due to the fact that the band felt there were not enough tracks in the album. Number 8 is the Carpenters' Close to You, released in 1970. This was the second and most successful album released by the brother and sister duo, the Carpenters. The album included hit tracks such as We've Only Just Begun and They Long to Be Close to You, which gained them a big amount of success and popularity. Close to You peaked number 1 in Canada, number 2 in the US, as well as remained in the top 50 hits for 76 whole weeks in the UK. Number 7 is Janis Joplin's Pearl in 1971. This was the fourth and last album by jazz singer Janis Joplin. Sadly, she died of a drug overdose at the age of 27 the year prior. She became part of the infamous 27 Club. All songs are recorded by Joplin except the track Buried Alive and in the Blues, due to the fact that she died before adding her vocals. Instead, the song was released as an instrumental version. Pear held the number 1 spot on Billboard 200 for 9 weeks and has been certified quadruple platinum by the RIAA. Number 6 is Billy Joel's The Stranger, released in 1977. This is the 4th studio album released by the legendary singer. Although his previous 3 proved to be successful, this one in particular was the one that made him a star. It remained at the number 2 spot for several weeks in the US after its release and is still the best-selling album by Billy Joel to this day. The album contains songs such as Vienna and Only the Good Die Young. Number 4 is ABBA by Ring Ring in 1973. This was the beginning of an era for the Swedish pop group. Its 4 members consisted of 2 real-life close friends who wrote all music and lyrics together with their wives leading vocals. Ring Ring was released in a limited release in several territories such as Australia, South Africa, and Mexico. On March 26 of 1973, it was not released in the UK until 1992, and in the US 3 years later. The band started out in 1972 with the track People Need Love, but it was not until the title track of the album was released that they agreed to be a permanent group. Number 4 is John Lennon's Plastic Ono Band, released in 1970. By the time this album came out, John Lennon was already a star for making a very long time. He was, after all, 1/4 of the most powerful band in the 60s, the Beatles. This was the debut album of John Lennon away from the Beatles, with such hits as Mother and Well, Well, Well. Beforehand, Lennon released 3 experimental albums along with his wife Yoko Ono and a live performance in 1969. Number 3 is Michael Jackson's Off the Wall, released in 1979. This album marked the first for Michael Jackson as a solo artist away from the Jackson 5, the group he had been a part of with his brothers at the time. This also marked the first collaboration between Jackson and Quincy Jones. They also collaborated together on Jackson's most successful album, 1984's Thriller. Off the Wall includes different tracks with different melodies such as Don't Stop Till You Get Enough, which makes you want to dance, She's Out of My Life, which makes you want to get some tissues to dry off some tears, and all tracks on the album were written by Jackson himself. Number 2 is Saturday Night Fever, a compilation of various artists from 1978. The movie marked to be one of John Travolta's most successful movies as a newcomer. Along with Grease, co-starring Olivia Newton-John, it would not be fair for the soundtrack of the movie to be successful as well as it did. After all, it did send the first 4 singles to the number 1 spot. This not only sent the movie and John Travolta into the golden spot, but the Bee Gees as well, who at that point were hitting any musical award show on the planet. Last but not least on our list is the Beatles' Let It Be, released in 1970. Even when John Lennon and Paul McCartney did not get along, they managed to make beautiful music together. This album was recorded in 1969 prior to Abbey Road, but was released a year later. This album includes beautiful, memorable music that will stay in people's hearts and minds even today. With hits such as Two of Us and I've Got a Feeling and Let It Be, those tracks marked the last album the band released together before disbanding in 1970. Thank you for joining us on the 70s Classic edition of Top 10. If you enjoyed this episode, click subscribe and don't hesitate to join us again for another edition of Top 10 List.